Derek Walsh kicked at the mud, caking his boots as he walked into the old barn. 3 years. 3 terrible years since his grandfather died and left him this Indiana farm. 3 years of watching crops fail and bills pile up higher than the corn ever grew. The rain was coming down hard that October morning. He could hear it drumming on the metal roof, and worse, he could see it leaking through in a dozen places. Each leak was another repair he couldn't afford. The bank had already sent 2 letters. One more bad season and he'd lose everything his family had built over 5 generations. He was checking the foundation in the feed room when it happened. His right boot went straight through the floorboards with a crack that echoed through the empty barn. Derek cursed and pulled his leg free, expecting to see dirt and rot underneath. Instead he saw metal. Smooth, dark metal that definitely shouldn't be there. Derek knelt down and cleared away more of the rotten wood. The metal continued in every direction, perfectly smooth except for these strange grooves running along its surface. It wasn't steel. Wasn't anything he recognized. And it was cold to the touch, colder than it should be even on this chilly morning. His heart started beating faster. Was this some old government thing? A bunker from the Cold War maybe? But his family had owned this land since the 1830s. Someone would have mentioned a bunker. He grabbed a crowbar from his truck and pried up more boards. What he found made his hands start shaking. The metal formed the entrance to a tunnel, sloping down into the earth. And along the walls were thin strips of something that looked like glass. As Derek leaned closer, they flickered. Then they glowed with a soft blue light. "What the hell?" Derek whispered. He should have called someone. The police maybe, or the county office. Instead, he went to his truck and got his flashlight and his grandfather's old hunting rifle. He told himself the rifle was just in case of animals. Deep down he knew that wasn't why he grabbed it. The tunnel was tight at first. Derek had to crouch to fit through the entrance, but after 20 feet, it opened up enough for him to stand. The blue lights grew brighter as he moved, like they were responding to his presence. The tunnel walls were that same dark metal, carved at an angle that went deeper and deeper into the earth. He walked for what felt like forever. His phone lost signal after the first 100 feet. The air should have been stale and dusty, but it wasn't. It was clean, almost sterile, and slightly warm. The tunnel curved left, then right, descending in a spiral pattern through solid rock that should have taken massive equipment to dig through. After 15 minutes of walking, maybe more, the tunnel opened up. Derek stepped out into a cavern so big his flashlight barely reached the far walls. And there, sitting in the center like some kind of shrine, was a ship. Not a boat. A spacecraft. Derek had seen enough movies to know what he was looking at, even if his brain refused to accept it. The thing was maybe 60 feet long, shaped like a teardrop laid on its side. The hull was that same black metal, but covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move when he looked at them from different angles. Part of the ship was buried in the rock, like it had crashed or been placed here a very long time ago. But there was no debris, no signs of damage. It looked intentional. Deliberate. Derek approached slowly, rifle held in sweaty hands. As he got within 20 feet, panels along the hull lit up with that same blue glow. Then, with a sound like a sigh, a door opened in the side of the ship. A ramp extended down to the cavern floor. Every instinct told Derek to run. Get out of the tunnel, call the authorities, let someone else deal with this. But his feet kept moving forward. Up the ramp. Into the ship. The interior was like nothing he'd ever seen, but also strangely familiar. Everything was built for human proportions. A single chair sat in the center of what had to be a cockpit, facing a curved wall of dark screens. Controls lined the armrests, covered in symbols that meant nothing to him. The whole space was clean, pristine, like someone had been maintaining it. Derek reached out and touched the armrest of the chair. The moment his fingers made contact, the entire ship hummed to life. The screens blazed with light, showing images that made no sense. Star maps, maybe, but of constellations he'd never seen. Data scrolled in languages he didn't recognize. Then the symbols changed. They cycled through what looked like Chinese, then Arabic, then Russian, then dozens of other scripts before finally settling on English. Words appeared on the main screen in simple block letters. Genetic verification complete. Welcome home, pilot. You have been expected. Derek stumbled backward, nearly falling over. A voice spoke from speakers he couldn't see. It was calm, neutral, almost familiar in a way that made his skin crawl. I am the Sentinel. I have waited 187 years for you, Derek Walsh. How do you know my name? Derek's voice came out as a croak. Your genetic markers identify you as a direct descendant of Thomas Walsh, my pilot. He crashed on this planet in the year 1838, fleeing an interstellar conflict. He settled here, started a family, and encoded specific genetic sequences to pass through his bloodline. You are the first descendant to carry the complete activation sequence. Derek shook his head. This is crazy. This isn't real. I understand your disbelief. However, you need to see something immediately. One of the screens shifted to show satellite imagery. Derek recognized the view looking down at his farm from above. 3 black SUVs were racing up his dirt road, throwing up clouds of dust. They were maybe 5 minutes away. Who are they? Derek asked. A government organization that has been monitoring for exactly this event for 73 years. They detected my activation. If they reach this location, you will be detained and transferred to a secure facility. You will not be seen again. Derek's mouth went dry. He looked at the screen showing the approaching vehicles, then back at the pilot's chair. What do I do? We leave. Right now. The ship is fueled and operational. I can guide you, but we must launch immediately. Above them, somewhere far overhead, Derek heard a mechanical grinding. The barn was opening, splitting apart on machinery that had been hidden for almost 2 centuries. He had maybe 2 minutes to decide. Stay and face whoever was in those SUVs, or trust a voice from a spaceship that claimed his great-great-great-grandfather was an alien pilot. Derek looked at his hands. Farmer's hands, his grandfather used to call them. Rough and scarred from work. Not the hands of someone who flew spaceships. But those SUVs were getting closer, and something in the Sentinel's voice made him believe that staying here would be the end of everything. Tell me what to do, Derek said and sat down in the pilot's chair. Derek's hands were shaking as he gripped the armrests. The moment he settled into the chair, something changed. He felt a tingling sensation spreading from his fingertips up through his arms, like pins and needles but not painful. More like the ship was getting to know him. What's happening? He asked, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. Neural interface is establishing connection, the Sentinel replied calmly. The ship will read your intentions and respond accordingly. Don't fight it. Let your instincts guide you. Through the main screen, Derek watched the black SUV screech to a halt in front of his barn. Men in tactical gear poured out, moving with military precision. They had rifles, body armor, the works. These weren't local cops. These were people who knew exactly what they were looking for. 10 seconds until they reached the tunnel entrance, the Sentinel said. Derek felt the ship rising beneath him. There was no engine roar, no violent shaking like in the movies. Just a smooth, steady lift. Through the screens he watched the cavern fall away below them. The barn structure above had split apart perfectly, revealing gray morning sky. The men below started shouting. A few of them opened fire. Derek flinched, but the Sentinel's voice remained calm. Small arms fire cannot penetrate the shields. We are in no danger from conventional weapons. They punched through the cloud cover in seconds. Derek's stomach lurched, and suddenly the ground was curving away beneath them. The fields and roads he'd known his entire life became a patchwork quilt, then a map, then something unrecognizable. The sky went from gray to dark blue to black in the span of a heartbeat. Oh God, Derek whispered. Oh God, we're in space. Earth hung below him, massive and beautiful and completely terrifying. He could see the curve of the horizon, the swirl of clouds over the Great Lakes, the thin blue line of atmosphere that was the only thing keeping everyone he'd ever known alive. His brain couldn't process it. This morning he'd been worrying about mortgage payments, and now he was looking down at the entire planet. Focus, Derek, the Sentinel said. I need you to stay with me. Your neural interface is adapting quickly, but you need to remain calm. Remain calm? I'm a farmer. I've never even been on an airplane. Your great-great-great-grandfather was a farmer too, before circumstances required him to become something else. The genetic modifications he carried are active in your system. Your reflexes, your spatial awareness, your ability to process multiple data streams, all enhanced. You're more capable than you realize. Derek wanted to argue, but alarms started blaring. The Sentinel highlighted something on the screen, a dot moving in orbit above them. Military satellite. It's rotating to track us. Can they really do anything to us from up here? The satellite fired. A beam of energy, invisible except for the distortion it caused in space, lanced toward them. The Sentinel jerked the ship sideways and Derek felt the movement in his bones. The beam missed by maybe 50 feet. That answers your question, the Sentinel said. Your government has clearly been preparing for this possibility. We need to leave Earth orbit immediately. More alarms. Radio transmissions were flooding in on multiple frequencies. Military channels, NASA communications, all demanding they identify themselves and return immediately. Some of the voices sounded scared. Others sounded angry. None of them sounded like they were going to just let them go. Where are we going? Derek asked. Moon's far side. There's an abandoned research station where we can hide while I explain your situation more fully. The ship accelerated and Derek watched Earth shrink behind them. His farm was down there somewhere. His truck parked by the barn. His grandfather's photos on the mantle. The life he'd been struggling to hold on to. All of it getting smaller and smaller until it was just a blue marble in the darkness. I can't believe this is happening, he said quietly. I know this is overwhelming, the Sentinel replied. Thomas Walsh felt the same way when he first piloted me. He was transporting grain between settlements when his world was attacked. He had no military training, no preparation. But he learned and he survived long enough to make it here and start a family. Tell me about him. About what happened. As they crossed the distance to the moon, the Sentinel told the story. Thomas Walsh had lived on a colony world called Meridian, farming land on a planet 60 light-years from Earth. He'd never heard of Earth, had never seen Sol on any star chart. When the Dominion came to Meridian, they gave the colonists a choice: submit to integration or be eliminated as a threat. Thomas had been making a supply run when the invasion started. He'd commandeered the Sentinel from a military depot during the chaos and fled with a handful of other refugees. Most of them died in the escape. Thomas kept running, jumping blindly through uncharted space until his damaged ship dropped out near a primitive planet that barely registered on his sensors. Earth in the year 1838. His ship was dying. The jump drive was fried, life support was failing, and the Dominion was still hunting survivors. Thomas made a choice. He crashed the Sentinel in Indiana, in land owned by settlers who would become his neighbors. He buried the ship, encoded the activation sequence in his genes, and lived out his days as a farmer, hoping his children or grandchildren might one day be in a position to continue what he'd started. What did he start? Derek asked. What am I supposed to do? He carried intelligence about the Dominion's expansion patterns, their technology, their methods. Information that could help others resist them. But more importantly, he carried something else. Coordinates to a place called the Archive, encoded in his DNA to keep them safe. You inherited those coordinates. Derek was about to ask what the Archive was when new alarms screamed through the cockpit. The screens lit up with warnings he couldn't read, but the Sentinel's voice carried an edge he hadn't heard before. We have a problem. 3 ships appeared on the screen, materializing out of nothing in flashes of distorted light. They were sleek and predatory, painted in dark colors with crimson markings along their hulls. They moved like sharks circling prey, positioning themselves to cut off any escape route. Dominion hunters, the Sentinel said quietly. They've been watching Earth's solar system for 2 centuries, waiting for me to activate. They detected my signature the moment we launched. The lead ship was broadcasting something. The Sentinel translated it into English on the screen. Remnant vessel Sentinel, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate termination. Derek stared at the 3 warships, each one probably carrying enough firepower to turn the Sentinel into dust. His hands gripped the armrests so tight his knuckles went white. He thought about his grandfather who'd served in Vietnam and come home with scars he never talked about. He thought about Thomas Walsh, a farmer turned refugee turned fugitive, who'd managed to survive long enough to build a new life. And he thought about those men in tactical gear at his farm, about the satellite that had tried to kill him, about a government that would make him disappear rather than let him exist. The Sentinel's voice was calm, waiting for orders. Derek, I need you to make a choice. Do we run or do we fight? Derek looked at the approaching warships, at Earth hanging in the distance behind them, and realized that his quiet life was over. Whatever came next, whatever he decided in this moment, there was no going back. How do I fight them? He asked. First, the Sentinel said, you need to trust me completely. And second, you need to hold on very, very tight. The lead Dominion ship opened fire, and Derek's first real test began. Run! Derek shouted as the Dominion ship's weapons lit up. The Sentinel didn't hesitate. The ship lurched forward with acceleration that pressed Derek back into his seat. The weapon's fire streaked past them, close enough that he could see the energy distorting space around the beams. His heart hammered against his ribs as they twisted and dove, the moon's surface rushing up beneath them. Hold on, the Sentinel warned. Activating jump drive. Wait, what does that? Reality tore apart. That was the only way Derek could describe it. Space itself seemed to rip open in front of them, showing something beyond that his brain couldn't process. Colors that shouldn't exist. Dimensions that bent wrong. They plunged through, and Derek's stomach tried to turn itself inside out. He tasted copper and heard a high-pitched ringing in his ears. Then it was over. They burst out into a field of tumbling asteroids, some as small as cars, others the size of mountains. The Sentinel killed their forward momentum and tucked them behind a particularly large rock, going dark and silent. Derek gasped for breath, his whole body shaking. What was that? Jump drive. We tear a hole in space and move through compressed dimensions. It's how we cross interstellar distances quickly. The Sentinel paused. However, the system hasn't been used in 187 years. It performed adequately, but we're running on failing components. I estimate we have 1 hour before the Dominion traces our jump signature. 1 hour. Derek's voice cracked. That's it. I can offer you more time. The ship contains a simulation chamber where time passes differently. What feels like days to you will only be minutes out here. You need training, Derek. Right now you're a liability. With training you might survive what's coming. Derek looked at his hands. They were still shaking. He was a 32-year-old farmer who'd never been in a real fight in his life. The closest he'd come to combat was breaking up a bar argument 5 years ago. I don't know if I can do this. Thomas Walsh said the same thing. So did every other person who found themselves in a war they didn't choose. But you have advantages he didn't. The genetic modifications in your system are already active. I can see it in your neural patterns. Your reaction time is faster than normal humans. Your ability to process spatial information is enhanced. You just need to learn how to use what you already have. Derek closed his eyes and thought about the farm. About giving up. Going back to Earth and trying to explain all this to whoever would listen. But he knew the truth. Those SUVs would be waiting. The government would lock him away. And the Dominion would keep watching Earth, waiting for the right moment. Okay, he said quietly. Show me what to do. The simulation chamber was a small room near the rear of the ship. Derek stepped inside and the door sealed behind him. The walls hummed and suddenly he wasn't on the ship anymore. He was standing on the bridge of a burning vessel. Alarms screamed. Bodies lay crumpled at their stations. Through the view screen he could see a planet breaking apart, massive chunks of it being torn away by Dominion harvester ships. A voice shouted orders in a language he somehow understood. Someone thrust a weapon into his hands. This is Meridian, the Sentinel's voice echoed around him. This is what Thomas Walsh saw. What he fled from. Now fight. The training was brutal. Derek lived through scenario after scenario. Ship combat where he had seconds to make decisions that kept him alive or got him killed. Ground battles where he learned to move, to think, to survive. The Sentinel didn't go easy on him. Every failure meant experiencing his own death, feeling the simulation reset, and trying again. But slowly something changed. Derek started to anticipate attacks before they came. His hands moved to controls before his conscious mind registered the threat. The genetic modifications the Sentinel had mentioned began to make sense. His great-great-great-grandfather had been altered somehow, enhanced to survive in situations normal humans couldn't handle. And those changes had passed down through 5 generations to him. When Derek finally emerged from the chamber, he'd lived through what felt like 2 weeks of constant combat training. His body was exhausted in ways he didn't understand since none of it had been real. But his mind was sharper. Clear. How long was I in there? He asked. 43 minutes. The Dominion hunter will find us in approximately 15 minutes. Derek moved to the pilot's chair and strapped himself in. This time when his hands touched the controls they didn't shake. The neural interface connected smoothly, and he felt the ship respond to his thoughts like an extension of his own body. I'm ready, he said. The Dominion hunter dropped out of its own jump about 10 miles away, its sensors sweeping the asteroid field. Derek watched it on the screens, tracking its movement pattern. The ship was bigger than the Sentinel, more heavily armed, and probably had a full crew instead of just one terrified farmer. But Derek had something they didn't expect. He trained in scenarios exactly like this. He waited until the hunter moved past their hiding spot, its attention focused on scanning deeper into the field. Then Derek fired up the engines and came out of hiding, not running away but accelerating directly toward the enemy ship. The hunter's crew reacted fast, spinning to bring weapons to bear. But Derek was faster. He twisted the Sentinel into a spiral pattern, making them a harder target, and dove under the hunter's belly where its weapon coverage was weakest. He fired the Sentinel's own weapons, smaller than the hunter's but precise, targeting the sensor arrays along the hull. The hunter went partially blind. It fired wildly, energy beams cutting through asteroids and turning them into clouds of superheated debris. Derek used that debris as cover, coming up behind the hunter and targeting its engine ports. The simulation training took over. His hands moved across controls, his mind processed trajectories and angles without conscious thought. The Sentinel responded instantly to every command, diving and weaving through the asteroid field like it was dancing. He got one clean shot. The beam struck the Hunter's left engine assembly, and it went critical. The enemy ship lurched, losing power and attitude control. Derek didn't wait to see if they'd recover. He pushed the Sentinel to full acceleration and headed deeper into the asteroid belt. "Jump drive status?" he asked. "Still cooling. I can initiate one more jump, but the system will likely fail afterward. We'll be stranded wherever we end up." Derek's mind raced. Earth was out. The government and the Dominion both knew about him now. He needed somewhere safe, somewhere he could figure out his next move. Thomas Walsh was part of a resistance network, right? The Remnant? Are they still out there? Unknown. Thomas lost contact when he crashed. However, I have coordinates for several Remnant outposts that existed before we went dark. The nearest is a station called Refuge Point, located in the Kuiper Belt beyond Neptune. How far? 3 days at sublight speed or one jump that will destroy our jump drive. 3 days of running from Dominion hunters, or one blind jump to a station that might not even exist anymore. Derek thought about the simulation training, about all the scenarios where hesitation got you killed. "Jump to Refuge Point," he said. "If we're going to be stranded, better to be stranded somewhere that might have allies." The Sentinel began charging the jump drive. Derek took one last look at the inner solar system through the rear sensors. Earth was a tiny point of light from here, barely visible. He thought about his farm, about the quiet life he'd been trying to preserve. That Derek was gone now. Dead in a way. Initiating jump in 3, 2, 1. Reality tore open again and they plunged through. This time, Derek forced himself to watch the impossible colors and wrong angles. Forced himself to adapt. When they emerged 3 days' travel away from Earth, in the cold darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, he was already scanning for threats. The coordinates pointed to a large asteroid tumbling through space. At first, Derek thought they jumped to an empty rock. Then the Sentinel highlighted it on the screen, showing him the artificial structures hidden across its surface. Docking ports. Sensor arrays. Defense platforms. Refuge Point existed. And someone was home. Unknown vessel, identify yourself immediately or be fired upon. The transmission came through in accented but clear English. Derek took a breath and opened a channel. "This is Derek Walsh, pilot of the remnant vessel Sentinel. Thomas Walsh was my great-great-great-grandfather. I'm here because I've got nowhere else to go and I need help." Silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then a different voice came through, female, shocked. "Did you say Thomas Walsh? From Earth?" "Yes." More silence. Then, quietly, almost reverently, "Permission to dock granted. Welcome to Refuge Point, pilot. We've been waiting a very long time for you." The docking process was nerve-wracking. Derek guided the Sentinel through a narrow tunnel carved into the asteroid's surface, following guidance lights that blinked green along the walls. His hands were steady on the controls, but his mind raced with questions. Who were these people? How long had they been here? And why did they sound like they'd been expecting him? The tunnel opened into a massive hangar bay. Derek's jaw dropped. There had to be 50 ships in here, ranging from small fighters to larger transport vessels. People moved between them, working on repairs, loading supplies. And they weren't all human. Derek saw beings with 4 arms, others with scaled skin, some that looked almost human but with eyes that glowed faintly in the hangar lights. "There are aliens," Derek whispered. "Actual aliens. Remnant personnel from multiple conquered worlds," the Sentinel confirmed. Thomas Walsh worked alongside many of these species before he fled to Earth. The Sentinel settled onto a landing pad with a gentle thump. Derek sat there for a moment, trying to process everything. 3 days ago he'd been worrying about bank payments. Now he was sitting in an alien refugee station billions of miles from home. The airlock cycled open and Derek stepped out onto the deck. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal, making his steps feel bouncy. A group of people approached, led by a tall figure with 4 arms and deep blue skin. Its eyes were large and dark, and when it spoke, its mouth moved slightly out of sync with the words Derek heard. "I am Commander Taurus. I lead the defense operations for Refuge Point." The alien's voice was deep and rumbling. "You claim to be descended from Thomas Walsh?" "Yes, sir. Yes, Commander." Derek felt like he was back in high school, called to the principal's office. "I found his ship buried under my farm in Indiana." One of the humans in the group stepped forward. She was maybe 40, with dark skin and gray streaking through her short hair. She stared at Derek like he was a ghost. Indiana? You're from Earth? Modern Earth. Yes, ma'am. Her hand went to her mouth. What year is it there now? 2025. October 2025. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. My grandparents left Earth in 1967. Secret mission off the books. They were trying to make contact with signals they detected. Instead, they found the Dominion and then they found the remnant. She stepped closer, searching Derek's face. What's it like now? Earth. Derek didn't know how to answer that. Complicated. We've got cars that drive themselves and we can video call people on the other side of the planet. But we're still fighting each other over stupid things. Still can't agree on basic facts. He paused. And we've got no idea what's waiting out here. I'm Dr. Amy Brennan, the woman said. My family has been with the remnant for 3 generations and I've never seen Earth. Only heard stories. She wiped at her eyes. Sorry? This is just a lot. Commander Taurus gestured toward the hangar exit. We should move this conversation somewhere more private. Your arrival has caused quite a stir. A Walsh returning after 2 centuries. Many here believed Thomas's bloodline had died out. They led Derek through corridors carved from solid rock, reinforced with metal supports. The station was bigger than he'd imagined, a whole community living inside this asteroid. They passed living quarters, a medical bay, what looked like a school where kids of various species sat learning together. Everyone they passed stopped to stare at Derek. Why are they looking at me like that? Derek asked quietly. Amy walked beside him. Thomas Walsh is a legend here. He was one of the original remnant fighters, one of the few who survived the first wave of Dominion expansion. When his ship went missing, people assumed he was dead. The idea that he made it to a hidden world, started a family, and encoded his ship's activation in his genes. She shook her head. That's the kind of story people tell their kids to give them hope. They reached a command center overlooking the hangar. Screens showed views of space around the station, tracking dozens of objects. Commander Taurus gestured for Derek to sit. Now tell us everything. Start from the beginning. Derek told them about finding the tunnel, about the government SUVs, about the Dominion hunters near the moon. He described the training simulation and the fight in the asteroid belt. When he finished, Amy and Commander Taurus exchanged a long look. You got lucky, Taurus said bluntly. That hunter crew was probably inexperienced. If you'd faced veterans, you'd be dead. I know, Derek admitted. The Sentinel's jump drive is fried. We barely made it here. Amy pulled up a holographic display showing Derek's genetic scan. This is remarkable. The modifications Thomas carried are fully expressed in you. Enhanced reflexes, improved spatial processing, accelerated learning. But there's something else here, buried in your genetic code. She zoomed in on a section of the display. Coordinates. Thomas encoded actual spatial coordinates into his DNA, designed to pass down through generations. Derek leaned forward. Coordinates to what? We don't know. The encryption is beyond anything we can break here. But based on what Thomas told people before he disappeared, we think it might be the archive. The Sentinel mentioned that. What is it? Commander Taurus pulled up another display, showing an ancient structure. Before the Dominion, before humanity, before most of the species we know, there was another civilization. We call them the Builders. They left structures scattered across the galaxy, most of them non-functional or destroyed. But the archive is supposed to be intact. A repository of their technology and knowledge. Why would Thomas hide those coordinates? Derek asked. Because the Dominion wants it, Amy said. Desperately. The Builders' technology is far beyond anything we have. If the Dominion gets access to the archive, they'll be unstoppable. But if we could reach it first. She trailed off, hope and fear mixing in her expression. Derek was about to respond when alarms started blaring throughout the station. Commander Taurus snapped to attention, reading data streaming across the screens. His expression went dark. Dominion fleet. 5 warships, dropping out of jump at the edge of our sensor range. Amy's face went pale. Oh, this station has been hidden for 30 years. Taurus looked at Derek. The hunter you disabled in the asteroid belt. It must have tagged your ship with a tracker before you damaged it. You led them right to us. The guilt hit Derek like a physical blow. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Apologies later, Taurus cut him off. Right now we evacuate. We have maybe 20 minutes before they're in weapons range. Amy, start the civilian evacuation protocols. I'll scramble our defense fighters. Defense. Amy shook her head. Taurus, we have 12 operational fighters against 5 Dominion warships. This isn't a battle we can win. We don't need to win. We need to buy time for the transports to escape. Taurus turned to Derek. How fast can your ship be ready to launch? The jump drive is dead, but everything else works. Why? Because you're leaving. Right now. Amy will go with you. What? No, I can't just. Taurus stepped close, his forearms crossing over his chest. Listen carefully, Walsh. 2,000 people live on this station. Families. Children. They're here because the Dominion destroyed their worlds. If those warships get through, everyone here dies. But if you can reach the archive, if you can access whatever technology Thomas hid there, maybe we finally get a chance to fight back. Derek felt the weight of it crushing down on him. I don't even know if I can find it. The coordinates are encrypted in my genes somehow. And even if I do find it, I'm just a farmer. I've had a few days of simulation training. What makes you think I can activate some ancient alien technology? Amy placed a hand on his shoulder. Because Thomas believed his descendants could. That's why he encoded everything in his DNA. He trusted that when the time came, someone from his bloodline would be ready. She paused. I know xenoarchaeology. I've studied builder artifacts my whole life. Together we might have a chance. The alarms grew more urgent. On the screens, Derek could see the Dominion fleet getting closer, their ships moving in perfect formation. Fighter craft were scrambling from Refuge Point's hangar, tiny specks preparing to face a force that could annihilate them. Derek thought about his grandfather who'd gone to war because someone had to. He thought about Thomas Walsh, who'd run for his life but never stopped hoping someone would continue his mission. And he thought about the faces he'd seen on his way through the station. People who'd already lost everything once. Okay, Derek said quietly. We'll go. We'll try. Taurus nodded once. 2 fighters will escort you. They'll do what they can to get you clear. After that, you're on your own. He pulled up a display showing the coordinates embedded in Derek's genetic code. The Sentinel should be able to extract and decode these once you're away from the jamming signals. Find the archive. Activate it if you can. And if you can't. He paused. Make sure the Dominion doesn't get it either. Derek and Amy ran for the hangar. Around them, the station transformed into controlled chaos. Families rushing to transport ships. Defense crews manning their stations. Everyone moving with practiced efficiency that came from drills they'd hoped never to use. The Sentinel was already being prepped for launch when they arrived. Derek climbed into the pilot's seat while Amy strapped into the co-pilot position. 2 sleek fighter craft took up positions on either side of them. Escort lead to Sentinel, a young voice came through. Name's Rena. I'll be your guardian angel today. Try to keep up, farm boy. Despite everything, Derek almost smiled. Copy that, escort lead. Let's get out of here. They launched just as the first Dominion warship came into weapons range. The battle for Refuge Point had begun, and Derek was running away from it, carrying hopes he didn't know if he could fulfill. The escape from Refuge Point was chaos. Derek pushed the Sentinel hard, weaving through debris and dodging weapons fire that lit up the darkness like deadly fireworks. Behind them, the station's fighters threw themselves at the Dominion warships with desperate courage. Escort 2 is down, Rena's voice crackled over the comm. Keep going, Sentinel. Don't look back. But Derek did look back. On his rear screen, he watched one of the fighters explode in a brief flash of light. Someone had just died, buying him time to escape. The guilt threatened to choke him, but Amy's hand landed on his shoulder. If we stop now, they died for nothing, she said firmly. Keep flying. The Sentinel's navigation system was already working on the coordinates buried in Derek's genetic code. As they cleared the battle zone, the encryption began to crack. A star map materialized on the main screen, showing a system far from any charted territory. 50 light-years away, near a dying red giant star. That's where we're going, Amy said, studying the data. Middle of nowhere. Perfect place to hide something you never want found. How do we get there without a jump drive? Derek asked. We make multiple jumps with what we have left, the Sentinel answered. I can push the damage system for 3 more jumps before complete failure. It will require precise calculations and considerable risk. Do it, Derek said. The first jump was rough. The ship shuddered violently, and Derek heard something crack deep in the hull. Warning lights flashed across his console. When they emerged, Rena's fighter was still with them, but barely. Her ship was trailing coolant from a damaged line. I'm okay, Rena insisted before anyone could ask. 2 more jumps. 2 more, Derek confirmed. The Dominion wasn't giving up. After each jump, within minutes, enemy ships would appear, tracking them somehow. They had to be using quantum markers or something Derek didn't understand. Each time, Rena would engage them, buying precious seconds for the Sentinel to charge its failing jump drive. The second jump was worse. Derek felt it in his teeth, a vibration that seemed to shake him down to his bones. When they emerged, 2 Dominion hunters were already there, waiting. Rena screamed into her attack run, weapons blazing. "Go," she shouted. "Jump now." "We need another 30 seconds to charge," the Sentinel reported. "I'll give you 30 seconds. Rena's fighter danced between the hunters, taking hits to her shields, firing back with everything she had. Her ship was smaller, faster, but outnumbered and outgunned. Derek watched helplessly as her shields failed. A weapons blast caught her engine section, and her fighter started tumbling. "Rena? Still here, farm boy," she gasped. "Made it this far. Not bad for a refugee kid, huh? Now jump." "That's an order. Rena, we can jump." The Sentinel tore through space one final time. Derek heard metal screaming, smelled something burning. When they emerged, Rena's fighter wasn't with them anymore. Just the Sentinel, alone in the darkness near a massive red giant star. Derek sat frozen, staring at the empty space where Rena's ship should have been. 2 escorts had left Refuge Point with them. Both gone now. Both dead because of him. "Derek," Amy said softly, "I know this is hard. But we have to keep moving. Make their sacrifice mean something." He wanted to scream. To punch something. To turn around and ram the Sentinel straight into the next Dominion ship they saw. Instead, he took a shaky breath and checked the sensors. "There," Amy pointed at the display. "That moon orbiting the 4th planet. I'm detecting artificial structures." As they approached, the scale became clear. A massive station orbited a dead, cratered moon. The structure was ancient, made from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its architecture was alien in ways that made Derek's head hurt to look at. Curves that shouldn't work. Angles that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. "That's builder technology," Amy whispered in awe. "It's actually real." The Sentinel docked at what appeared to be an airlock, though the mechanism was unlike anything in the ship's database. As the seal formed, Derek and Amy suited up in emergency gear, not knowing what atmosphere, if any, they'd find inside. The airlock opened onto a corridor that stretched into impossible distances. The walls were dark but seemed to pulse with faint patterns like breathing. Emergency lights kicked on as they moved, following them down the passage. "It's responding to our presence," Amy said. "After millions of years, it's still functional." They walked for what felt like forever, Derek carrying a weapon he'd taken from the Sentinel's armory, Amy clutching a tablet loaded with everything she knew about builder technology. The corridor branched and split, but something guided them. Derek couldn't explain it. He just knew which way to go. "Your genetic code," Amy realized. "It's not just coordinates. It's a key. The station is reading your DNA and showing you the path." The corridor opened into a chamber so vast Derek couldn't see the far walls. In the center stood a platform covered in holographic interfaces that sprang to life as they approached. Symbols flowed across displays, beautiful and incomprehensible. Amy rushed to the nearest interface, her hands moving across the holographic controls. "This is it. The archive. It's not just a library. It's a weapon system. The builders left it as a failsafe against extinction-level threats." Her voice rose with excitement. "Derek, if I can activate this, it won't just call for help. It'll shut down Dominion technology across multiple sectors. They've been using stolen builder tech for centuries, incorporated it into everything. This can exploit that, turn their own systems against them." "How long to activate it?" "I don't know. 10 minutes? 20? I need to decode the activation sequence." Alarms suddenly blared from Derek's suit. The Sentinel sensors were going crazy. Multiple ships dropping out of jump. Dominion fleet. Big one. Derek's blood ran cold. "How many?" 15 warships. They tracked us through the jumps. They're moving to intercept the station." Amy's hands flew across the controls. "I need more time." "How much more?" "I don't know." Derek made a decision. "Keep working. I'm going back to the Sentinel. If I can draw them away from the station." "That's suicide. Your ship is damaged, no jump drive, and you're one pilot against 15 warships." "Then I better be creative." Derek started back toward the corridor. "Amy, if I don't make it back, activate that thing. Shut them down. Make all of this worth something." He ran back through the twisting passages, following the lights that seemed to guide him. The Sentinel was waiting, systems already powering up. Derek threw himself into the pilot's chair and launched before he could think too hard about what he was doing. The Dominion fleet was spreading out, surrounding the station. They knew what it was. They knew what it could do to them. They'd come to destroy it even if it meant destroying Derek in the process. "Attention remnant vessel," a cold voice transmitted. "Power down and surrender. You cannot win this fight." Derek didn't respond. He fired up every weapon system the Sentinel had, pushed the engines to maximum, and flew straight at the nearest warship. It was insane. Reckless. Exactly what they wouldn't expect. The battle was brutal. Derek used every trick he'd learned in the simulation chamber. He flew close to the station's surface, using the ancient structure to block targeting solutions. He ducked behind debris, used asteroids for cover, made himself impossible to pin down. The Dominion ships were more powerful, but they were cautious. Afraid of damaging the archive. Derek had no such concerns. He flew like someone with nothing to lose because that's exactly what he was. The Sentinel took hit after hit. Shields failed. Hull breaches sealed automatically. Warning lights filled his cockpit with red urgency. "Derek." Amy's voice cut through the chaos. "I've almost got it. 30 more seconds." 30 seconds. Derek had to give her 30 seconds. A Dominion cruiser cut off his escape route, weapons charging for a killing shot. He couldn't dodge. Couldn't run. This was it. Then the universe changed. A pulse erupted from the archive, invisible but devastating. Every Dominion ship simultaneously went dark. Their engines died. Weapons powered down. Life support failed. The warships that had been hunting Derek seconds ago were now drifting hulks, crews struggling in emergency conditions. It worked. Amy shouted. The archive exploited backdoors in their stolen technology. Every Dominion ship within 50 light-years just got hit with a system-wide shutdown. Derek let out a laugh that was half sob. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd actually done it. But the archive wasn't finished. From the station, a signal launched into deep space, faster than light, carrying a message into the unknown reaches of the galaxy. A call for help that would take years to reach its destination. If anyone was out there listening. "Derek, get back here," Amy urged. "The station's starting to destabilize. It used everything it had for that pulse. We need to leave now." He guided the limping Sentinel back to the dock. Amy was already waiting, having run through the collapsing corridors. They sealed the airlock just as sections of the ancient station began tearing themselves apart, its purpose finally fulfilled after millions of years of waiting. The journey back to Refuge Point took 3 days at sublight speed. The Sentinel's jump drive was completely dead, but so was every Dominion ship in the region. When they finally limped into the station's hangar, Derek was exhausted beyond anything he'd ever experienced. Commander Taurus met them on the deck. Behind him stood families, survivors, people who'd lived another day because of what Derek and Amy had done. Because of what Rena and the other escort pilot had sacrificed. "The Dominion is in chaos," Taurus reported. "The pulse affected their fleets across multiple sectors. It's not permanent, but it's bought us time. More than that, your signal reached 3 other remnant stations. For the first time in decades, we're coordinating. Organizing. We might actually have a chance now." Derek nodded, but he couldn't feel victorious. All he could think about were the people who died getting him to that archive. Rena's voice saying, "Not bad for a refugee kid," before her fighter exploded. Amy seemed to read his mind. "They knew what they were fighting for," she said quietly. "They chose it. Just like you did." Commander Taurus stepped forward. "The Remnant would be honored to have you stay. We need good pilots. Especially ones with your lineage." Derek thought about it. About staying here, fighting alongside these people. But he shook his head. "I need to go back to Earth first. My world has maybe 20 years before the Dominion recovers and comes in force. Humanity needs to know what's out here. We need to prepare." "They won't believe you," Taurus warned. "Some will. Enough will." Derek looked at the Sentinel, battered but still functional. "My great-great-great-grandfather spent his life trying to protect people. I guess it runs in the family." A week later, the Sentinel approached Earth orbit. Derek broadcast on every frequency, sending out proof of what he'd seen, what was coming. He knew most governments would try to suppress it. Knew people would call him crazy. But he also knew humans. They were stubborn. Survivors. When the truth couldn't be hidden anymore, they'd rise to meet it. As Earth filled his view screen, the Sentinel's voice spoke softly. "Thomas Walsh would be proud. You didn't just activate a ship. You continued a legacy." Derek Walsh, the Indiana farmer who'd found a spaceship under his barn, had become humanity's first defender in a galactic war. He looked at his homeworld and accepted the weight of what came next. The fight had just begun. But for the first time in centuries, the remnant had hope. And humanity had a warning. That would have to be enough.